So when we talk about drawing the sword, we use the term nuketski. So when I draw the sword, vertical draw, shomen cut, standard punch chiburi, and now I'm going to resheath, noto. Noto, I want to form my hand in what's called a koiguchi, a fish's mouth. It simulates holding of the saya, the sheath of the sword. I want to lay the spine, the mune of the sword, between my thumb and forefinger, and I slide the kisaki into the koiguchi. Finish it and step up. Sometimes you'll hear the term aiguchi and or aiuchi. Aiuchi means blended. So you have a mouth and a mouth, but you don't have a hand guard, you have no suba. So this would be the idea of an aiuchi, wherein I'm putting this into a matching mouth. So there's aiuchi, koiguchi, part of the noto process where you resheath the sword. So we're discussing this idea of the kiai, the spirit shout. It is the yell that helps to awaken your energy. It helps to give you power. It helps to give you focus. It can sometimes be used to interrupt an attack. In classical swording and in Toyama Ryu, there are really three classical kiais that we often use. There is the E, Ya, and To. So those are the three. If I am a junkyard dog, if I use this analogy again, and someone's coming into my area, I will often look at you and I go, "Arr." It's that growl, it's that projection of a presence of what we call the zanshin, one of the 5 minds of Budo. Being able to have that continuous mind, that presence that fills a space spiritually. If someone is coming into the room and I don't know who they are and I think they're going to attack me, and I have a sword, I may draw my sword, and I simply look at them and make that A sound. If someone did that to you in a restaurant, or someone did that to you if you were moving towards them, I'm betting you would probably stop. At the very least, you would think, what the hell's wrong with this guy? That's the interruption, that's the atemi, that's the pause that the kiai really helps to invoke through its energy. If I want to make it more powerful, as if I'm actually striking or hitting someone, all I do is add a P at the end of those. The A is typically the first strike, the Ya is the second strike, and the To is the third strike. So if I were striking with power for just one strike, the P is kind of silent, it's at the end of it. If I have to do 2 strikes, again, the P silent at the end of it. If I have to do 3 strikes, you can see where that occupies the space very powerfully. Gives you focus, gives you energy, gives you strength. It also gives the other person pause because they're now fighting somebody who's very animated and somebody who is clearly developing power through these spirit shouts. So we all have heard the term kiai. Most people associate kiai with the powerful yells when people do in Taekwondo, we call them hyongs, or in Karate Do, when we do a kata, the first movement, the middle movement, the last movement, you usually have a kiai of some sort. But a kiai is more than just a shout. It's really a spirit shout. It's meant to awaken the spirit, to give you strength and power and focus. When we think of it that way, it's interesting if we look at the kanji, which represents kiai. On this side, this kanji says Aikido, Chu Do Kan. We're going to focus on these 2 elements, the I and the ki. Ki is the idea of energy. So if you visualize this as a teapot, and inside of the teapot is rice. That rice is being cooked. As the rice is cooking, the tea lid comes off of the teapot and it releases steam. Steam in the form of that universal energy. If you study Buddhism or Shinto, these are animistic religions, practices that believe that all things in nature have ki or chi. They have a power that is kind of this universally unifying element. Again, that term masubi, which is this idea of a thread that ties all things together. So the one above it, this is ai. Ai is a way of fitting things together or blending, okay? So we have a teapot, we have a tea lid, and we have the rice. And those three things fit together in a universal way in order to eventually create this energy. There you have it. Ki, ai. So in this section, I want to introduce this idea of kotodama. We just finished talking about kiai, the spirit shout, something that we use to awaken the spirit within us to create power and focus and energy. Now let's talk about this overall practice of kotodama or kototama. Koto is Japanese, it just means word. And then dama meant divine or spirit or God. I've even heard some people say that it kind of meant like ghost in a way, something that was spiritual that you couldn't really see. So they believed that sound carried energy, that words carried energy. There's a great book by Louis Amdor that talks about the power of words, and he focuses it more on this idea of verbal jujitsu and verbal aikido in order to de-escalate situations. It'd be a good book for you to look at. So when we talk about kotodama, we're really talking about an art that O-sensei, the founder of Aikido, believed very strongly in, and he practiced his art of the kiai throughout most of his martial skill sets, but also the chants. In Shinto and in Buddhism, there are certain universal sounds. The universal sound of creation was felt to be this idea of the Om sound. Also, Su and U were considered these sounds of creation. So often you will hear Buddhist monks and Shinto priests, when they chant, they will say Ooh or Su or Om. When they're doing that, they're trying to reach a certain vibratory level. Interestingly, as a Western medical practitioner, I was an Army flight surgeon and a colonel when I retired, so I'm rather skilled in Western medicine. There's a therapy realm that's kind of rising in popularity. It's called acoustic therapy. Around 287 hertz, which interestingly is this tone. You'll often hear that tone being rung as priests meditate, and they'll say Om. And you can hear it and feel it. That stimulates the pineal gland, which is a gland at the base of the brain. It helps to stimulate the human growth hormone, serotonin, norepinephrine receptors. All of these things kind of are part and parcel. You can tie them in with your meditative practices. So kiai, the spirit shout, kotodama, kototama, is the idea of the power of sound, the power of words. In this section, we're talking about the 5 minds of Budo. I've written these minds out on the board behind me: Shoshin, Mushin, Zanshin, Fudoshin, and Senshin. So we'll start with Shoshin. Shoshin means the beginner's mind. When we think about the beginner's mind, the beginner has started something new, they're very enthusiastic about it,
They wake up in the morning, and in my case, I wanted to get back to the dojo because I enjoyed it so much. It's that desire to learn something new every day, the shoshin, the beginner's mind. The next mind, mushin, is a little more complicated. Mushin is this idea of no mind. It doesn't mean that you walk around thoughtless. It means that you train to a level to where you don't have to make the connection between thought and movement. I had a situation when I was overseas in Afghanistan with the Army where I had a jam on my weapon and I had to perform sports. The military guys know this means slap, pull, observe, release, tap, squeeze. It worked beautifully, and I had trained it to the point to where it was automatic. I had taken a course called the Expert Field Medical Badge, which is a very challenging course in the military. It took me 2 tries to actually get my EFMB. Then I go off to combat, and I got a combat medic badge as well. But sports was part of that curriculum, and it really paid off later on whenever I was deployed overseas in Afghanistan. The next is this idea of, after Shoshin and Mushin, then we have this concept of Zanshin. Zanshin is this projection of spirit or projection of energy. It's the junkyard dog that looks at you and he goes, "Arr," and you immediately back up because he's projecting that very negative, scary energy. Or maybe it's your mom's baked chocolate chip cookies, and the smell, it's just wonderful. And she's there and she's kind of not even looking at you, doing things, and your hand starts to slide over to get that cookie. And she stops and looks. And she gives you that look that your hand just automatically comes back, and you know not to take one of mom's cookies because they're for company, they're for guests. That's Zanshin. The next is the idea of Fudoshin. Fudoshin is the ongoing, ever-persistent mind of the martial arts master. My living example of this is my friend Bill Superfoot Wallace. Bill's had over the years some medical conditions with his hips, with his knees, those sorts of things, but you wouldn't know it if you trained with the guy. He's constantly working on boxing skills, constantly training, constantly excited about what it is that he does. He's approaching 80. He does seminars all over the place. It's this Fudoshin, this ongoing master's mind where he's just enthusiastic about everything that he does. The last is the idea of Senshin. Senshin, I like to draw on this word misubi, which is to tie a knot. I think Senshin, which is this idea of the enlightened mind, is this misubi where we tie everything together. Those first 4 minds all come together and they occupy themselves in that one person, that enlightened person. In Buddhism, we might call this satori, where you've reached the state of enlightenment. I kind of liken it to just a martial arts guy who's done this for half a century or more, who really enjoys what it is that they do. They constantly train, and they start to get the payoffs of all of that. Their fitness level is better, their awareness level is better, their enjoyment of life is better. Everything sort of comes together, and you realize what a gift you've been given through this martial arts training. Guys, that's my take on the 5 minds of Budo. Next section is coming up. Section, I wanted to talk a little bit about this book. This book has significant meaning to me, and I'll kind of get into that. But the book is called Comprehensive Asian Fighting Arts, and it's by Don Draeger and Robert Smith. Martial artists, if you aren't familiar with Don Draeger, you should do a little research, become familiar with this guy. He truly was a martial arts pioneer here in the West. Draeger had served in the United States Marine Corps. He was in World War II. He actually was a Marine, fought in Iwo Jima, and was promoted to captain, would later be recalled to service and sent to Korea, and was promoted to major while serving in Korea, and eventually got out of the Marine Corps in 1954. During that entire time, he had lots of exposure to martial arts, and interestingly, he's from Bluefield, West Virginia. And he had some exposure to judo there as a child, and so that sort of lit the fuse on his interest in martial arts. This book, Comprehensive Asian Fighting Arts, is really a landmark work by Draeger and Smith. that goes into great detail, especially on Japanese fighting arts and on Bushido and the sword, what we're studying now. Draeger held Menkyo licensing in the samurai sword. He also studied Judo, Karate-do, Aikido, specifically Tomiki Aikido. So lots of different styles of Japanese martial art that he studied. This book, to me, is really special because when I open up the back of it, it says, Merry Christmas, Son, 1971. So it was a book that was given to me as a Christmas gift by my parents back in the 1970s, early 1971. So that's well over 40 years old. If you haven't read it, the book is Comprehensive Asian Fighting Arts by Draeger and Smith. I'd strongly recommend you get that for your martial arts library.